We are ready. Welcome to class 4 as we get going. Thank you for taking your time to join us. Can I please invite you throughout class to be mindful of the education that you're receiving? We are giving you so much information as trainers, and I'm Denise Beecham. I will be giving you a ton of information. McKay and Terry already have been giving you information. All this is critical information that you will need to care for the children that come into your home. And so be mindful of that. Know that you can come back to pre-service anytime, that you can join the online classes anytime that you want to do that. I, again, am Denise Beecham. I am the instructor today. However, even though I'm the instructor, I'm not the only teacher. So I invite you and give you a welcome to an invitation to share as we go over concepts today and as we talk about this certain topics, ideas and situations, experiences will come into your mind. I really encourage you to unmute and share with us um, that those thoughts. It helps everybody. Your experience as staff members is so powerful. Your experience as foster parents working with families is so powerful. And so I just encourage you to feel welcome to unmute and make comment as you feel like you would like to do that. I will also ask for some involvement today. And sharing with you. So you have had a chance, not very long, but you've had a chance to look at the color wheel. You'll also need a piece of paper and a pencil for training today, but I can give you a minute to gather that later on if you don't have that with you now. You've had a chance to look at the color wheel. Where are you? You are on class 4, so you've seen this multiple times before. Are you in the habit of checking in, having that self-awareness, being mindful of where you are on the color wheel? This is so powerful because you will have children come into your home that won't know anything about this color wheel. And as you're able to have that self-awareness, have that self-reflection, and verbalize that, it will be so important. That means as you come in from the day and you say, wow, I'm a little bit overwhelmed today, they're going to need to hear that. Typically, children coming into care know 4 emotions: happy, sad, angry, mad. That is far from the emotions that could be going on for them. And so as you share that, it becomes more reasonable and more expected that they would share that those emotions become familiar to them, that they learn that they can lean into those, voice those, and move from there and share those with you as well. And so where are you on that color wheel? Um, Make sure that you really know how to do this for your kids too, as they're learning to be aware. Maybe, maybe point it out. Wow, the way you shut that door, get curious. I wonder if you're mad right now. They can say, no, I'm not mad. I'm sad. Or no, I'm not mad. I'm whatever. But getting curious will help them be open with you. And so please get in the habit of doing that and know that your children will need you to do that for them as well. If you're on the color wheel this morning and you're in a place of, well, where do you want to be in an hour from now? Where do you want to be 6 hours from now? And what needs to happen to get there so we can take, excuse me, steps in that and also teach and model that moving through emotion. Today, we're going to talk about separation, grief, and loss, and I'm going to ask a huge ask from you. I'm going to ask you to consider that we are in a conference room together. I know that we don't even do conference rooms right now. We do online, but consider that we're in a conference room, please, that you've come to training, that you're coming to learn about the skills and abilities that you'll need to refine those to have kids come in your care. I really want this to be practical for you as much as possible. So imagine that you've come to a conference room today to get this information, that we're all together. And when class is over, I'm going to ask you to leave all of the things that you've brought, what's around you, leave all of those things that you've brought on the table. And when we leave, we're going to go out the front door and down the steps. And in the parking lot is a line of white cars. That line of white cars has a driver in each car, and they are going to take us to our next location. You do not have to worry. I have gotten everything planned out. I have everything. We're going to absolutely, you're in safe hands. You're going to get in the back of one of those white cars. The driver has been told to take you to a certain location. Yeah, again, you don't need to worry about anything. You'll be back to get your stuff. Don't worry about not knowing where you're going. I've got everything under control that way. But please get in the back of that white car and I will give you further instruction after you're there. How many of you are ready to go? You can trust me. I'm a Utah foster care employee. How's that sitting for you? You ready to go? Like I said, I know where you're going, knowing you'll be back. I got it. Folks, no, I want to hear from you. How does that feel? If you're really getting in the back of a white car, you've got a driver taking you to a location. Are you ready to go? Is there any uncertainty? Is there any uncomfort in that? Do you have any reservations? I might be the only control freak here.
Well, I mean, it's situations like that. Like, do I need my chapstick even? I mean, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that's a little bit hard to envision just simply walking away and just getting in without the just any detail
Yeah.
and the comfort things that we would take for different circumstances. I don't have my water bottle. Do I need my chapstick? Like things like that. It's just you can't even picture just our next event without thinking
Yeah.
through those little things. But the complete uncertainty of how long and where and everything, that's a little bit hard to picture at all.
Thank you. Thank you. Ben in chat wrote, I want my phone. His life is in the phone, right? You look at your phone for the next appointment. What you're going to miss. He wants his phone. But you don't need any of that because where you're going, you won't need it. Folks, for me, this was my first experience coming into foster care. Liz, she's not going with us. She is not on this field trip. She's just downright, I'm not going. Whoa. Okay. This was my first experience coming into foster care. As a new foster parent, I walked in a conference room. I was just there, as many of you are, to check it out, to see what it was all about. Now, I had an aunt who had done foster care. My beautiful mom, it was an open door. She would let anybody in her home. She just had a hard time when they left. Like that was there. But I walked into this conference room. I walked down the stairs into the conference room. There's a, I don't want to say a little lady, a tiny lady at the beginning, at the front of the table, and she said, "Hey, folks, before you get too comfortable, I need you to follow my instructions. After class, leave everything on the table. And you're going to go out this door. You're going to go up the stairs and down the stairs into the parking lot. There's a line of white cars. There's a driver in each of those. Do just leave everything on the table. We'll be back. You'll get your stuff. I have you going on a journey today. I, Nobody could have known that I left a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, anyway, and a 3-month-old at home. My 3-month-old had feeding issues where she would throw up a lot of what she ate. So she was hungry fairly often. And she was barely handling breast milk at the time. We didn't start any formula, anything like that. And instantly, as I'm faced with this is where we're going, this is what we're doing. I am uncomfortable in my skin. And my first thought goes to that little baby, the babysitter who says, go out and do something for you. I've got your kids, this dear friend. I've got your kids. Go, just do something for you. Nobody knew where I was. Nobody knew when I would be back. And here I am getting in the back of a white car, or so to speak, her wanting me to get in the back of the white car and go somewhere. She even said further, if you are here with a spouse, which I was not at the time, she says, if you're here with a spouse, you both get in your own white cars. I question, why can't they go together? Why wouldn't they be able? Anyway, all that's going through my mind as I think about my children. If I didn't come home with my children, know that I would be fighting tooth and nail to get to them. Would my babysitter, who had to talk me into leaving, how long would she wait before she would become concerned? Again, I just was overwhelmed with a little bit of anxiety and panic as I started to think of this. She looked over at me and I couldn't help it. I had tears running down my face. And she said, whoa, 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 whoa. This is just an exercise. What do you think it feels like for that white car to pull up, for a child to get in the back and be taken to an undisclosed location? They're being told that you're safe, that you're going to care for them, that you're going to love them, that you're going to meet all their needs. They are leaving everything familiar. They are leaving everything they know. They don't know where they're going. They don't know when they'll be back. All they know is everybody who is familiar, everyone who there is any comfort with, they are not going to have. Sobering thought. What's going on in your head?
Denise, I was going to say, I don't think you're the only control freak. I think, um, I know that for me, it would be so uncomfortable. It would be so, I like my stuff. I like my knowing what's going on. It's uncomfortable to live in the unknown. And it just, I mean, I like that story because it puts it in perspective of how much, um, I would be sacrificing, how much of that control, how much I'd be giving up and feeling helpless that I mean, I'd be longing to be able to just have what I know and am comfortable with.
That with me. Don't you also think, Ben, that you as an adult, as I an adult, hopefully we have a little bit of logical thinking that a child doesn't have, and we've got skills and ability that a child doesn't have. Think of the helplessness that they must feel. Their brains are not, I don't know, you would be in survival mode anyway, but they can't even form some of those logical thinking that to ask the right questions, to know what to ask, to know what to do. I think that's really
That's
hard.
that's what I was just gonna say, Denise, is as you're talking about this, like I can feel myself just like shutting down, like completely checking out. Like I don't even know what's happening, but I am not dealing with it kind of thing. And so, yeah, not even knowing what questions to ask or how to respond, just total kind of freeze mode is just hearing it where it was putting me, you know.
Thank you, Kobe. Really good thought because we're going to talk about exactly that, that survival mode of when we feel that threat, when we're out of, we're going to go, we're going to be there. Thank you. Also in chat, um, Tarani is on the same page with Liz. She says, I don't know you. I'm not going with you. Don't go with strangers to a second location. Haven't we been told that? This is not safe. Imagine for that child, though. Tarani is saying, Liz is clearly saying, I'm not going with you. Does a child? Is a child able to voice that? Nope. And they are going. They're going wherever we're going. I know. I'm a true crime junkie too. And so I know what happens when things go wrong. I've listened to the podcast. Yes, I gotcha. I gotcha. So this is the reality for many children coming into care. And I appreciate, do you know, sitting in that class, I was there to see what all this was about. It was that day and that time that I thought, if I can be a safe place for kids to come while their parents get themselves together, then that should be what I do. I can be that safe place. I can do that. And that right there solidified my journey in foster care. As we talk about separation, grief, and loss, thank you for your comments. That helps so much. As we talk about separation, grief, and loss today, we are going to talk about some building blocks. Please be mindful of this little person that is building this wall. I don't really know what he's building, but let's pretend it's a wall. You can see that he is building it with absolutely precision. He's even putting mortar in between the bricks. This wall is going to stand. The characteristics that we talk about each class are characteristics that will help you through your journey in foster care, help you meet the needs of the children coming into your care. So today we're going to focus on empathy, compassion, self-awareness, self-reflection, and being emotionally supportive and nurturing. Absolutely, these are characteristics. If you have not, these characteristics are in the self-assessment in the training portal under the course class. So you can go in and you can take this self-assessment and you can see where your strengths are and maybe be able to have mindfulness around that. And I encourage you also to go back in and take that same self-assessment at the end of classes and see where you are. Are you in the same spot? Have you moved a little bit? Have you refined? I mean, I don't know what that is for you, but absolutely, we want to see where we are coming out of that. And so, as we talk about self-awareness and self-reflection, absolutely, self-awareness is essential for parents who are fostering and adopting children with a history of separation and loss. That child's grief reactions may trigger your own unresolved loss and grief. We want to have and identify where our own reactions come from and where a child starts and where a child ends and we start. We want to make sure that we have that self-awareness and self-reflection. Also, we're going to talk about empathy and compassion. And as we talk about separation and loss, I just asked all of you to go on a journey that you could absolutely see what that might be for a child. And so having that empathy and compassion for how difficult that might be for a child. So empathy and compassion, it's not unusual for children to express feelings of loss and grief. And most of the time that's going to be through behavior. And children are not going to have the language skills to sit down with you and say, you know what, they just picked me up from my house. My mom was getting in the police car. My dad was getting in the police car. Nobody helped me get clothes. I don't have anything. They are not going to be able to communicate that to you. So important that we have that compassion and empathy. And we look at behavior as a communication tool for our kids. Also, children will need your support in processing their feelings of loss and grief. Absolutely, they will need you to help them lean into that and work through that. When we talk about being emotionally supportive and nurturing, we want to focus on children will need you to create an environment where they feel safe to verbalize and process feelings of loss and grief. Your ability to be empathetic and emotionally supportive and nurturing will help create that safe place for the children to open up. We are going to listen to a podcast, and this is Dr. Gregory Manning and April Dinwood Woody, and we're going to just talk about this for just a minute. As you listen, as you listen to this, will you please, as you hear Dr. Manning talk about grief and loss, for those that are being adopted, will you listen for maybe a learning point that you can share with us as we talk about this?
Welcome to the NTDC podcast, Separation, Grief, and Loss. I'm your host, April Dinwiddie. In this episode, we welcome Dr. Gregory Manning, a clinical psychologist based in Orange County, California. Dr. Manning has worked in government, nonprofit organizations, and mental health agencies providing case management services for youth in care. Dr. Manning is also a nationwide trainer and speaker on issues related to mental health, foster care, and juvenile justice. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Manning.
Thank you, April. Great to be with you, and please call me Greg.
Oh, yes, of course. We're going to jump right in on this important topic. As a starting place, can you help our listeners understand how children may experience grief and loss?
First, we need to establish that grief is a normal reaction in response to losses and challenges in our relationships as people. And specifically for children, there are a few basics. First, the experience of loss for children can be very confusing, as they're less likely to comprehend and understand the reasons for a loss. And they may not know, why is the person gone, or why is their relationship changed? And this can be very challenging for them and lead to very challenging and confusing behaviors. Next, the younger the child, the more likely it is that the grief is to be expressed outwardly. And specifically, we can see them demonstrating a lot of challenging behaviors, such as aggression, defiance, and or withdrawal. Here's an example. So in response to a loss, a child who otherwise is very playful and engaging at school and at home may become very physically aggressive, and they may refuse to do things around the home or in the classroom. And they also may withdraw and not want to play with any friends or not want to be around their family members. I think the most important thing to realize that for children experiencing foster care is that most of their losses occur when they are no longer physically connected with the person. For example, when a child is removed from a parent and their family because of abuse or neglect, that's a loss. And I think it can be profound for them, because I think it's a lot of times the problem is that we don't experience or acknowledge that as a loss. I think it's important to realize that for children in foster care, that separation is a huge loss for them.
Is the same true for adoption as well, Greg?
Adoption takes it even to another level, because when a child is adopted, a lot of times they are in a home which people celebrate. Like there's a whole big celebration that, hey, you're in a loving family home, and that you should feel lucky and that you should feel privileged that you're in this loving family home. While they hopefully are in a loving family home, that is a positive experience for them, it doesn't negate the fact that they're not with their family of birth. That is a big challenge for the youth, but also for the caregivers, because why isn't this child celebrating us? Why isn't this child happy? Well, they may be happy that they're with you, but they still can be sad that they're not with their parents. I think when losses are not validated, it prevents any closure. And I think if we prevent closure from someone who's experienced loss, what we're generating is that they're likely to struggle in terms of their ability to experience and process that grief and loss, that they may be the only ones experiencing it, because if everyone else neglects it, then they're the only ones experiencing it. And as a result, they don't have any resolution or any healing. Also is that they're not given the right to grieve their loss. So they're confused, I'm grieving, but I'm not allowed to. And also, without this validation, they're also not provided with the sources of support and or treatment necessary to facilitate a healthy resolution of their grief and loss. And that has a profound effect on all of their relationships, both peers and at school, and especially in the family home that they're in right now.
So how can parents who are fostering or adopting support children in acknowledging their grief and loss?
Number one, verbally acknowledge to the children the loss that they've experienced and that they are likely continue to experience. Really put that to words right in them in a caring, supportive way. Number two, verbally affirm to the child that they have a right to grieve that loss, and then share your feelings about loss as well. You don't have to say that your loss is similar to theirs, but you could share your experience of loss to try and connect with them. And verbally commit yourself to support the child through their grief and loss, no matter what and for how long it takes. Parents need to remember that it's oftentimes easier to be angry and to act out than to work through the grief and loss. And this is true for us as adults as well, because when we're working through the grief and loss, we have that sadness, we have the tears, and that can be really tough to be with. I think it's important for parents to realize before solving the problem for the child, you have to really take the time to sit down and listen, engage, and support the children to find out what they need. Because really, there's nothing you can do to solve the loss. You can just support them and be with them through the loss. Also, make sure that we provide ongoing physical and emotional safety for the child. Make sure that as a parent that you're consulting with the foster care and mental health professionals to help you understand where the child is at and what strategies and techniques are best for this child, which may be different from other children that you may be fostering or adopting as well. We also want to make sure that we really focus a lot on the words we and us, because when you say like you are experiencing this or you are doing this, the child feels very isolated and judged. But when we hear we and us, then we feel that support and we experience the love in that. Be very clear to the child that you're going to work with them and help them through the difficult time no matter what. And it's likely going to get ugly at times. But when you commit to them that I'm going to be with you, it's so critically important.
Oh my gosh. These are such amazing practical tools, and they have so much value for parents. As we bring this podcast to a close, what are some of your final thoughts?
Sure. I think the most important thing is we want to take away from this is that parents need to be partners with the child and help identify what the child needs and what the child wants to do as they journey through this grief and loss experience. And last but certainly not least, we want to recognize that the impact that caring for children with significant grief and loss challenges can have an impact on us as the parents and caregivers and adults. And we want to especially make sure that you also ensure good self-care. Just like you're caring for the children, make sure that you demonstrate good self-care. Also be ready that your own past or present experience of loss may be triggered by your journey along with the child through their grief and loss. Reach out to other mentors or support groups and respite care when necessary. And the therapists and social workers, like we mentioned before, are also critically important.
Well, I can't think of a better way to close out this podcast. Greg, I want to thank you for sharing your knowledge, your insight, and all of these practical tools for parents. Thank you.
We're going to stop right there, but what did you hear Dr. Manning say about the grief and loss that a child goes through? What stood out to you as something very real for the kids? Something we need to be aware of?
For me, it's the importance of acknowledging it and not pretending like, oh, well, you're in a better place now, you're in my home, and so things are okay now. But it is acknowledging the hard that has occurred. It's acknowledging everything that has happened and helping them to look at it as opposed to close it off and put it away.
Awesome. Love that. Thank you.
One thing that I heard repeated over and over, and I heard this as a saying that really helped me was, adoption is the only loss that we expect people to be excited about.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's just really not fair. The other thing that really stood out to me is that it's so important as foster parents or adoptive parents to let the child know explicitly that they can talk about things, that they can say, I miss my mom. I miss, I'm sad about this. Because one of the kiddos that we adopted was kind of just struggling. And when we've kind of got to the root of the problem, he said that he was worried that his birth mom was going to die and he wasn't going to know and he wasn't going to be able to go to the funeral. And, that was such a big weight on this little kid's shoulders. And once he was able to express that to us, we reassured him, of course, we will go as a family. We will make sure that you are involved. And that, just knowing that, was such a relief to him. And it wouldn't have come up if we hadn't have initiated that conversation, if we hadn't have said, it's okay to talk about these things, and making sure that you're intentionally bringing it up from time to time and saying, hey, how have you had any thoughts lately about your birth parents? Or, just trying to bring it up and make it a natural part of your life because they are thinking about these things. Even if they're young, they're thinking about these things. And they need to know that it's okay to talk about them and that it's okay that they're feeling them. And yeah, that is just I would say the most important thing when it comes to fostering and adopting is saying you can love so many people and it's okay that you have these thoughts and these feelings and everything is fine and safe and for you to feel them.
I love that. Thank you. Those are such good comments. And I appreciate the purpose and the intention in asking, hey, I wonder what you're thinking about your parents today. Not if you're thinking, because they are. It's what are you thinking about and opening that door. Yes. What else? Thank you, Marshall. That was great. Good concepts.
I had a conversation with an adoptee a couple of weeks ago. I was out in the community in my role as a Utah foster care staff, and this young woman approached me. She's a college student, and she said, "Oh, I was adopted from foster care." And I just looked at her and I said, "Oh, I'm so proud of you. Children who've experienced foster care don't often make it to college. This is a really big deal for you. And I'm so impressed by what you've done." And she said, "Oh, no, no, no. I was adopted like when I was 3. So I just, I didn't have some of these hard experiences." And I said, "Stop. Let's not go there. Let's acknowledge this. You went through some very difficult things at a very young age, and we're not going to minimize that." And then she kind of stopped and kind of clouded over, and I kind of stopped and clouded over, and we both just kind of sat there and cried and acknowledged her own trauma and past instead of this, like, "Oh no, it's okay. It was a long time ago. I was very young." We recognized and appreciated it and took that moment to acknowledge that even though this may have happened when she was very young, that didn't erase it. She still had those very big loss, grief, difficult things, and the fact that she had managed to overcome all of that to be in a place where she was ready to be a college student. Doesn't matter at what age those things occurred, and she didn't just magically overcome it. I just really was appreciative that we were able to take a moment and pause that and not minimize everything that she had been through. It was a really impactful moment, I think, for both of us to be like, no, actually, it doesn't matter the age that you experience this. You still get to acknowledge it. It was still a very big and very real thing in your life.
What a beautiful experience. I'm so glad you were there in her life at that time. I had the opportunity of adopting 4 children through foster care. The youngest one came to me at 3 weeks old. She, at 6 years old, we had a placement, and that child, that sibling group, was ready to go back home with their mom. And this 6-year-old said to this friend in this sibling group, she's the lucky one. She gets to go back home to her mom. That yearning for mom never ends. That yearning for what they've lost and how they've gone through that never ends. Here's a little girl that's been with me for as long as she can remember. And her foster sister is the lucky one because she gets to go back home. And I think there's so much in that statement that we can look at and say, for these kids, it is difficult. That is very difficult what they're going through. also in chat. It says, the part that stood out to me was with the kids, their behaviors are more external or outwards. As adults, our behaviors are more internal. We are reserved with our thoughts and feelings. I appreciate that, Marissa. And there is a video that we watch in one of the trainings that there's a young man who his whole life was trying to prove that he was worth being loved. So here he is, a grown adult, and he's like, am I worth your love now? Like just searching to be loved and internally really striving to live up to some, I don't even know, live up to be loved. And that can be so difficult. Marshall says, same. Seems like it was a conditioned response as well, Jenny, that she wanted to keep everyone comfortable about the topic at the expense of her own feelings. I appreciate that. I do appreciate that. So when we
Just
talk about,
acknowledge the other side as well, Denise, that
yeah,
it's also hard for the parents, right? Parents who have adopted and have
mhm.
given their all to the kids and have just given them everything they can imagine, and the parents try to do their very best. And then to have the kids still have that yearning for someone else, that can be hard as an adult and as a parent, and to know that they still want those connections and to be okay with them having those connections or seeking out that person, because it kind of feels personally, that the parent's not good enough too. So it's hard on both sides to be in either place, and something that, like we've talked about, needs to be talked about, addressed, not ignored, for both parts of the relationship.
Kobe, I sure appreciate you going there. Hearing my own daughter say, oh, she's the lucky one, she gets to go home, was heartbreaking for me. I was like, oh, I'm not the real mom, right? I'm just here for fun. And we're not having at times very much fun because we're processing all that grief. We're processing all that trauma. So we will see those behaviors. We will deal with those behaviors. We will work with our children through those behaviors. And to hear them say, I just wish I could go home to my mom, it can feel very personal. We know it is not personal. We know that is grief and loss and separation. And every child needs to express that. And absolutely, thank you, Kobe, for speaking to that, because there was nothing short of heartbreak when I heard her say that. So the ambiguous loss that Dr. Manning talked about, that is so difficult for our children because the person is still alive, but not available or less available to the child. And let's not kid ourselves. Many children that come into care have been the caretaker of the entire family. So they have been the emotional support. They've been the physical support. They've been doing it. And so I've had many children say, but my mom's not going to be okay without me giving her her medication. My mom's not going to be okay if I'm not there to take her and remind her. And my mom won't show up to visits if I'm not there to help her get there. And so we see this huge part of not only that person is still there and I just can't get to him, but my role has been with that person, caring for that person, doing all of that. And now you've taken that out of my hands too. And it just leaves a child feeling very empty. So for a child that's got that parentification, it just feels like I've lost my place in the world. And they don't know, is the person going to return? Are they not going to return? I have had many kids. I've been a foster parent for 25 years, and I've had many kids walk through my door. The first question I get is, when do I get to see my mom and dad again? First question, when do I get to see my mom and dad again? Please be honest with them. I don't know when you get to see your mom and dad again, but you know what? When I talk to your caseworker, that's the first question I will ask, and I will let you know what they say. And don't you worry, the first time they can set up an appointment, I will make sure to get you to that appointment. I don't know what's going to happen in a case, right? I can give no sureties. I don't know that. But I absolutely want to be be empathetic and compassionate to that question. When do I get to see my people again? When do I get to see my mom and dad? And even returning, even that first visit, things have changed. That relationship might not be ever what it was. And that's a loss as well. Now, the state has intervened. Now I'm living with different people. When I needed you, where were you? There's just so many things that change that relationship. And so we want to be mindful of that as well. Really, what we get from ambiguous loss is that it's not final, that there's no certainty. I don't know when you get to go home. I don't know how long you'll be here. I don't know what it was that brought you into care sometimes. I don't know where your parents are. I don't know what's happening to them. That uncertainty is very, very difficult for children of just the not knowing. Any comments?
The world also doesn't have rituals to help us through ambiguous loss. When there's a death or a divorce or things like that, the world acknowledges that you're going to need some time to work through that grief. But with ambiguous loss, you're supposed to just pick up and keep going the next day as if nothing has happened, even though your world has been turned completely upside down.
That's a good point, Jeremy. Such a good point. Because we don't see it. We don't know how to reach out. We don't know what to do. And that loss is ever so real. And that grief is real. Yes. And we lose an opportunity as foster parents if we're not connecting with the child and watching behaviors that might tell us when we can step in and give that support. I appreciate how responsive you are in chat. Tracy shares a personal experience. She says, I don't think I realized how complex grief can be until my dad passed away recently. We didn't have a very good relationship, and the grief is extremely complex, right? What do I miss? What do I not miss? Where do I stand? Yeah, all of those things are so important. Tracy, thank you for sharing, especially on a personal level. So ambiguous loss, absolutely. Children who have been abused, separated, lost, removed for neglect, they don't have a clear timeline when they're going to return. We've talked about this. They can't affect the outcome. They'll say, what can I do? What can I do to go home with my mom and dad? They are not the ones that need to be on the service plan making those active steps. So how difficult for a child when the person who is supposed to, or when they can't see even the steps that their parents are taking. They don't see the parent getting a job. They don't see the parent getting housing. They don't see the parent entering treatment. I mean, sometimes they can be a part of that, but also there's a lot behind the scenes that's happening. They continue to hope for reconciliation, and they feel absolutely in limbo. Absolutely. Ambiguous loss, it also applies to other children who have lost early connections. What about? We just talked about the adoption and how they wonder about their family and the what ifs they would have had with their family. What if? And the movies are so helpful to us right here, because if we follow that what if I find my dad? Is he a famous football player that I can bedazzle his football? Is my mom a famous rock singer? Have my parents been looking all over for me? And when we find each other, it's going to be the most amazing thing ever. I mean, this in social media, on movies, that it's there. And so we need to be mindful of what those what ifs might have been, and the fantasies about what could still be, and be there for them and be that safe place as they go through that journey. I can assure you If you as a foster parent, if you are as an adoptive parent, are not on that journey with your children, they will go without you. If you are not open, if there are split loyalties, as Marshall was talking, if you're not willing to have those conversations, they will go on their own. They will go find a friend with a phone. They will go to Facebook at school. They will go on their own. I watched my brother, who had adopted 4 children through foster care, and his oldest son came to him, always having the conversation about, are you thinking about your parents? Do you know, he came and he said, I don't have any contact with my parents, and you give me updates, but I think I want to find my dad. And he said, do you? And he goes, yeah, I'm 18 and I just think I want to find him. And he says, well, and said, come in my office. And he showed him exactly where his mom is, exactly where his dad is. He pulled up the Washington County inmate and he says, here's your mom. Your dad was released on this date. He is living at this address. How can I assist you in getting the information that you need for you? This child went on to move away from his adoptive parents for a little while. And because of that response that he had of being that safe place, he was able to come back when that relationship wasn't all that he thought it was going to be. And it was because there was openness there. There was a willingness to go there with and be supportive of that journey that child needed to go on. So we heard Dr. Manning talk about children that grieve differently than adults, and they grieve in spurts, acting fine at times, and at others, they're falling apart or not acting fine or having a difficult time. Grief can show up in expected ways, as many of the expected ways we've talked about. It can also show up in unexpected ways. And grief will look different behaviorally than it does for adults. We know that children behavior is communication. This is not my quote, but behavior is communication for children who have lost their voice. We've got to recognize, and one thing that was told to me early on in my experience was, Denise, I want you to look at every single behavior and say to yourself, what is this behavior communicating to me? Because you will miss a lot of really important times if you're not continually saying, what is this behavior communicating to me? Okay. Some common symptoms of ambiguous loss. Here's many. Even holding on to unhealthy relationships, for looking for that connection, even if it's a false sense of love. It's giving me something that I need right now. Feelings of guilt and shame. Was I enough? Did I do enough? Helplessness and hopelessness. Children are so helpless in the situation where they are. And I want to mention, we were in a training class and a participant unmuted. It was McKay's class. A participant unmuted, and he said, I'm a therapist that works with children in foster care. And he said, I had a child once tell me, I am so excited to go home. I get to go home to my parents, and my foster parents are crying and they're having a difficult time, and it's a morning time at home. Here I am, eager to make this move, but I feel pulled back because my foster parents aren't ready for me to make this move. And so we got to recognize, even though that's a real thing for you, that we can be in 2 different places. And just what Marshall was saying about, we're pulled. We've got joys of all joys having this child. We've grown close to them. We love them. We want to share in that. And then we need to say goodbye as well. And so it can be difficult, but we want to make sure that we're not the one holding that child back, and that we're willing to go on that move with them in whatever way is best for them. Oftentimes for children, when they come into care, they may exhibit behaviors that are intended to distance themselves from you as a way of dealing with that grief and loss. So in other words, what happens is when we feel threatened, when we feel like our world is falling apart, we go to survival mode. And that survival mode is going to take care of things. So the hand model of the brain that Dr. Perry or Dr. Siegel talks about, the brainstem at the bottom of the wrist, the brainstem, the middle part of the brain, the hippocampus, the amygdala, the emotional part of the brain, and then the neocortex, the prefrontal lobe. Prefrontal lobe thinking, processing, memory, execution. It's doing the thinking part. The emotional part, it's just feeling it, doesn't it? And it may not be feeling exactly what is going on. If it's a perceived threat or a real threat, it's the same. The child doesn't know, and in fact, adults don't always know the difference between a perceived threat versus a real threat. How many of you have ever woken up in a nightmare and you're like, oh my gosh, I was falling off a cliff, or whatever it was. I was humiliated, or whatever it was. Your body, your mind just went through that experience as if it was real. It was a nightmare. It was a dream, whatever it was. But your body didn't know the difference. Our children, if they experience that threat, they're going right up to that emotional threat, survival mode, flight, fight, freeze, sometimes fall. If I come to your home and I hide behind the door and I jump out and scare you, I better be careful because Jenny might go to freeze. But what if Marisa goes to fight? Like, we all have those responses. And for our children, when life is too big, when things are overwhelming, when we're not in control, when we're helpless, when we're hopeless, we're going to go to a place of survival. That's the way our brains were intended to protect us and keep us safe. So a child going to that part of their brain is absolutely a child that needs to have peace or respite from that time. Now, survival is not peace by any means, but that's what the brain is intended to do. So a child in survival, they are not going to be able to process. They're not going to be able to easily acknowledge the losses and be able to grieve. One of the things we do as foster and adoptive parents is provide safety for our children. So then again, they can begin to process and heal. Many times and we'll talk about this in class 5 when we talk about trauma, but many times for children that I've had in my care, survival isn't a place that we go to. It's a place that we've been in for a very long time. You'll hear me say it again. It was never a place that we were supposed to set up residency. We were not supposed to build our house there. Children that have been in an unsafe situation for so long, that will become their new normal. That will become their residency. And it is very, very difficult and takes a lot of work and a lot of processing and a lot of healing to come out of that. And the beautiful thing about foster care is you get to be on that journey with them. You're going to be working with a therapist. They're going to be working with a therapist. It's amazing to me what a safe place affords a child. What a bed, what a meal, what care, what encouragement. And you get to see you get to be on the front lines and you get to see that. It is amazing the growth and development that happens in a child that feels safe. And I am excited that you get to experience that and you get to see that in that work. I do a training, and one of the questions I ask in this training where I get to hear from foster parents is, what do you wish you would have known before doing foster care? And this comes up multiple times. So this last comment here, this last bullet point, it says, behaviors may intend to build emotional distance or separation from the foster family. This gentleman says, I wish I would have known the push and pull attachment dance that children do. I find that our children are saying, come here, come in, love me, care for me, be here for me. But let me hold you at an arm's distance because, well, what if you're not safe? I mean, there's a whole bunch behind that, right? I don't know if you're okay. I don't know if I love you. Does that mean I don't love my parents? There's a whole load there for our kids. But oftentimes, that's one of the things that happens for children in care. Let me pull you in. Please wake up with me when I have a nightmare. Please hold me close. But also, let me keep you at arm's distance because that might be really scary to have you in a place where I have to trust you, where I have to connect with you. And then I might leave you too, or you might leave me, or what the world of possibilities could be. All right. And then the child moving to adoption may face the reality that they will never return home, but we'll still think about that family. We've talked about that. And you guys have been very great to bring so many points in that discussion. Help children recognize the loss and begin the grieving process. Let them know it's okay. One of the things that we've done, and it's been done for a long time, is we're like, oh, you're sad, you're crying. Oh, let me make this better for you. I hope that there is a place where we can say, oh, you're crying. Oh, you're upset. Would you come sit by me and cry? Not go to your room, not let me make it all better, not any of that, but come cry with me because I care about you. I want to know what your heart is feeling right now. If you don't want to talk, I just want you to be with me. I don't know if you ever heard it as kids, but if you're going to cry, I'll give you something to cry about. If you're going to cry, go to your room and cry. No, nobody wants to hear it. We are going to change that for our kiddos in care. We're going to say, if this is how you're feeling, feel it with me because I want to be on this journey with you. All right. Lastly, for this part of the class, before we go to break, I want to, well, it's not lastly, but I want you to get your piece of paper and your pencil out that we needed for class. And I can give you a minute to get it. If you don't have one right handy, find that piece of paper and pencil. And we're going to go on a journey. Folks, we already did much like this earlier, but again, please make this practical for you. It is clear when our participants in our families in class make this practical and when they don't. Lots of times as I'm a support person and I'm supporting McKay or Terry, McKay has to remind them, please don't give up after the first dump or after you're removing the first time because we need you to go the full way to get the learning point. Okay, guys, we have to move. We have to move quickly. We are moving. Tomorrow, the moving truck will be here. We are going. I need you to be ready to go. We've got a moving truck on its way and we are moving and we will not return. We will not return. I need you to think of 10 singular things or people that you're going to take with you. Folks, a family is not one thing. A family can be however many there are. Look at McKay. She's on this. She knows. So one thing. It's not all your belongings in your dresser. It's one thing. One thing. What are you taking? 10 things. Write them down really quickly. That sounds kind of contrary. Write them down really quickly, right? These 10 precious items you get to take. So if you're taking your pets, each of them are one. If you're taking kids, each of them is one. If you're taking grandparents, if you're taking heirlooms, if you're taking whatever you're taking, singular items. I'm not going to give you very much time. So write those down pretty quickly. Kind of give me thumbs up when you're good. I'll follow your lead. Great. Thank you. Thank you. Great. Some people are having a really hard time. 10 things. You're not coming back. Okay, I've got enough thumbs up. Shoot, you guys, the truck was smaller than we thought. I'm so sorry. You're going to remove 5 things from your list. You may only bring 5 things now. Please put them in a chronological order. What 5 things are you going to take? I'm so sorry. I couldn't have guessed that we were going to have to size down, but we are. I appreciate you making hard choices, hard decisions. Please write them down. Please stay with me. Oh, folks, oops-a-daisy. We're going to have to even size down more. I am so sorry. Truck, way smaller than we thought. More people coming. We're not going to be able to get everything in. But instead of removing 3 things from your list, I'm going to help you. Will you just remove number 1 and number 3? Just cross off number 1 and number 3. So sorry about that, folks. I'm going to help you by just helping you eliminate that so that we can get this truck on the road and get moving.
So they may
Okay.
actually not be number 1 and number 3, just the first and the third that are remaining, correct? Because my
Yes.
number 3 is already crossed out. So the first and the third remaining.
Oh, no, you're removing the first and the third. You're removing the first and the third. The first item, the third item, or I hate to say item when these could be people, but the first and third, just cross off the list. Tracy, what did you leave? I'm going to call on you guys, so be ready. Tracy, what did you leave? What did you cross off?
Well, I had my husband, my children, my dogs, and my phone was the last thing. And the first cross off, I had to choose between my husband and one of my kids. And I'm not even going to say who I chose, and then I had to cross off more. So yeah, it was very
For
it
your
was a
best
little
benefit at home,
traumatizing.
it's probably good that you not tell us what you chose.
But then you didn't give me a choice, and so I had to cross off 2 of my kids. And
right.
yeah, that's awful.
Yeah. And that was helpful because you know what? When we go in a home and we remove when the CFS goes in a home and removes children, there might be a bag to throw a little bit of stuff in. There might not be. So sometimes we get stuff and sometimes we don't. I think that my experience is a little bit different than most people who do foster care because a large majority of the children coming in my home have come with nothing or a book bag. Have come with nothing. Okay, Michelle, what did you leave behind? What's number 1 and number 3 for you? What did you leave behind?
A lot of people that I would have brought with me.
Okay, what do you get to take?
A couple of those people.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Jenny Hill. What you leaving? What you taking?
So same thing. I'm taking people with me. My whole list was people. And
Okay.
yeah,
Whole
I
list
get
was people.
yeah.
So who's being left behind?
Everybody
If you
but my
will.
2 youngest. Yeah, everybody but my 2 youngest.
I'm so sorry that you're leaving your people behind. Yeah, that's tough. Marshall, who are you leaving?
I
Share
had to
who they're
leave
leaving.
my wife, my 2 cats, my phone, some other things that didn't matter as much. I just couldn't think of anything. But yeah, so
Okay.
that would be so hard.
Wife, pretty big deal. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Marshall, I hope that you can edit this out, but we are having a thunderstorm and my internet just said that it is very unstable. So if I go off, folks, just come back, just stay where you are. I'll come right back on unless the power goes out. But please just stay on. It happens. McKay and I are always warning that this could happen, and we are having we're grateful for it, but a thunderstorm. I can also tell I'm lagging, and so that is at risk. All right, so children's losses, that's what we're talking about here. And I think we can all agree on there are a lot of losses for children. What other losses are there? Parents, siblings, extended family, friends, pets, belongings, the familiar environment, just the food that McKay eats at her house and the food that I eat at my house, probably pretty different. I had an uncle whose wife passed away, and my sister went to stay with them while they were there for the services. And she said, Denise, yeah, I was more hungry on those 3 days than I have been my entire life. There was like no food. There was no food available. And what was, I didn't feel like, she said, it just was so hard. Think about that for kids coming in care, their status with their family and school and friends, and for the parents, the right to have the child there, to parent the child, to be in that child's life, former caregivers, neighbors, connection to their racial, cultural, and ethnic community, access to their personal history and medical information, school records, and other records of milestones that they've made. We don't get to have that paper that says I'm moving from first to second grade year after year. We don't get those because I'm in transition. Genetic connections are also privacy. Everything's in the open now. Self-identity, sometimes even their name is changed at adoption and change for their pre-existing roles in their relationships. It's important for us to remember the depths of the losses that many children feel at such a young age. Children don't have the years of experience to manage these losses. Our role is to help them grieve and manage those losses. And one way to lessen the impact of loss is to maintain connections with the people and the communities that are important to them. Just as you were putting everything in that truck, what were you going to lose? What was going to be a loss for you? The feel of your bed? The feel of your home? I mean, I told you to grab people and things. But how many of you come in your home and it's your safe place, it's your good place, and you're losing that environment? And you're losing what's familiar. We know that for domestic violence women, this isn't even men, it takes leaving between 9 and 13 times to leave for good. It's not because they like the abuse. There's familiarity there. It's what they know. And our children, this is, no matter what they're experiencing in their home, it is what they know. And there's familiarity there. I know when people are going to be upset. I know how to walk around that for the most part. All right. This is Debbie Riley, and she is going to talk a little bit about separation and loss for our kids.
Grief in children is very different than grief that we see in adults. You know, most adults will be able to converse about it. You know, I'm feeling really sad today. I'm thinking about today's the anniversary of my mother's death, or My husband passed away 6 years ago, and I'm just really having a hard time with it. And so, there's that articulation that one would have around these issues. Our children grieve behaviorally. So an example would be they come home from school, you ask them how the day went, the backpack gets thrown on the floor, they're stomping around, and little did we know that maybe something in the curriculum at school triggered a sense of loss for them. So they're going to act out the loss versus then being able to come and sit down at the table and say, I'm feeling really sad today because today was the day that, the police came into my home and the social worker and I was taken away from my birth parents. An example, again, of how the loss in children kind of presents itself is one day in a classroom, a teacher read a book, Are You My Mother? I mean, it's a book that's often read to first or second graders, and it really triggered this sense of profound loss for this child that had been in foster care and removed several times into different homes. And so the child ran out of the classroom. The teacher was just stunned by why he left abruptly. The guidance counselor was called in. The parents were called. And nobody really understood, what was underneath all of that. That really what happened was that it really, triggered the loss that he had been struggling with. So I think, it's important, again, to understand how children grieve and also how things could trigger unresolved grief and loss. When we think about how we can support our children around these loss and grief issues, I think that we have to sort of be a couple steps ahead of them. So if it's a birthday coming up, or Mother's Day, or Father's Day, or a holiday, or, you might be going to the movies and it might have a theme, around families, I think we just need to think about how that might trigger their feelings of loss and separation and be able to talk about it. Maybe the birthday's coming up. I know that, I've worked with kids before and parents struggling. Why is it that every time we have a birthday, it's a disaster? And the parents never really understood that as we began to think about the birthday and begin to prepare for the birthday, it reminded them of the loss of the birth parent. Who was the mommy whose tummy I grew in? And that's what birthdays are about, the day that we were born. But yet I'm not with those that brought me into the world. And so if parents can begin to talk about it, that, we're going to celebrate your birthday in a couple weeks, and this is what we're planning to do. And I wonder, you might be thinking about your birth mom or your birth dad, and maybe we want to talk about that. Or maybe we would light a special candle on the cake for your birth parent. Something that we can honor. I think the key here is that we can't expect children to forget, and we shouldn't ask them to forget the people that, whether they were psychologically present or actually physically and then separated from, that we still need to honor those connections for them. I think it's important for parents as we begin to think how you can support the grieving process is, number one, acknowledge that the grief and loss is real and that it's going to be present. The children might not, again, be talking about it, so you want to be really in tune to behaviors and be thinking about, wow, what's underneath some of this acting out or withdrawal or isolation or change in appetite or change in sleeping habits or pulling away from special activities. Could be that your child is grieving. And so you want to be able to talk with them about it. Ask them what they're thinking, what they're feeling. But don't be afraid to bring up the discussion. And I think that's hard because we sometimes live in a world where we think that if we talk about it, it's going to make it worse, from a parental lens, that if we just steer away from it, everything's going to be okay. Like, why would I want to bring up loss? Why would I want to bring up these separations when, in fact, I think it would be better if they didn't think about it, right? And they just moved on. And I think that's probably the worst thing that we can do, is that we need to be able to sit with their sadness, to embrace that, to give them the space of how to be sad. And I think it's also important that we use our own experiences to talk with children. All of us experience some level of loss in our lives, whether it's a pet, a relative, a spouse, in a community, we've experienced something. And I think we need to let them know that we too grieve and this is impacting us and that we're here for them and we could give them strategies. When we think about how children grieve. You know, we've been talking about that they grieve behaviorally, but we also have to understand that children grieve in spurts. So again, different from an adult that could, sit down and have a conversation for an hour around, their feelings of the loss. Children might be able to do little pieces of that work. It might be 3-5 minutes where you'll get some understanding about how they're feeling, and then they say, okay, I want to go out and play basketball, or can we draw a picture, or can I get a snack? And I think it's important that we respect their ability to acknowledge that at that moment in time, but not push it, because it becomes really overwhelming. I mean, their little brains and their little minds and their hearts a lot of times can't process it more than a couple minutes at a time. So I guess patience is really important from a parental lens. And I think that also as you interface with helping professionals, you also have to understand that this work, if they're in therapy, is going to take time. It's not going to be addressed just in 1 or 2 sessions. It could take months. I mean, some of the kids that I've worked with, they're still working through this years later. And it also will rear its head developmentally. So it might come up at 3, it might look different at 5, then at 7. And adolescence, the loss often is embedded in a lot of anger and resentment. And then later in life, around key transitions of marriage, the birth of a child, the death of a parent. It's important that we see it through a developmental lens.
Yeah, you have been so expressive in chat, and I appreciate that. So these are some common grieving behaviors in chat. Tracy Elred says, we recently adopted our youngest son, who has significant special needs and is nonverbal. After he was first removed and came to live with us, he cried for a couple of days. With everything he had going on medically, I assumed he was in pain. It wasn't until months later that I realized he was probably grieving. I think he was mourning the loss of what he knew as home. Even though his basic needs weren't being met there, it was still the only home he knew, and losing it was a real loss. Even though his cognitive abilities are much younger than his actual age, his emotions are real and complex. He may not have words, but he still feels loss. It helped me to realize how emotionally complex even a baby can be. Isn't that true? They may not understand what's happening the way we do, but they are experiencing separation, disruption, and grief. Tracy, thank you so much for sharing, as it will be with many kids who come in your care. Tracy speaks as an advocate for those kids. Please be patient with them. Know that they've got a lot to heal from, and we won't always know what the trigger is or where they are on that healing process, but we can provide that safe place for them to heal. There's one more video. I hope it will play a little bit easier, but there's one more video that I would like to show you, and we'll see if it'll play a little bit better than the last one. I appreciate you. Okay, this is a little video. Sydney was removed and placed in foster care, and this is her experience. It's really, really short. She's just talking a little bit about the grief that she went through.
I was in 7 other foster homes before this one. The differences in between this home and the other homes is I used to run away, and now I don't run away. I would always throw stuff around at people and just tore down things, and so I just don't do it here anymore.
Once a kid is taken from their parent, if they didn't have an issue before, they got one now. And that's what I try to tell some of the social workers. I said, once you took that kid away, they're going to become bitter, they're going to become destructive, they're going to become angry. They're going to have a lot of problems wrong with them because you took them from their comfort zone, from their parents, from their school, from their friends. You took them away and you expect them to be okay with that. They're not.
Okay, very quickly, but some important things are said there. She used to run away, but now she's okay. What do you think that her mom's name is Mrs. Beavers? We'll see her again in future videos. But what do you think she's doing to provide safety, to help her grieve some of those losses? What do you think she's doing to help her along?
She obviously has a really good understanding of grief and loss. And I love the point that she makes about how, when kids come into care, we've added trauma to them. They obviously have things that have caused them to come into care, and they need to have those things resolved. And a lot of times we focus on that, like, okay, there were things that were happening in their homes that weren't safe and need to be resolved. But what we often forget is removing them, while necessary, still adds a level of trauma to the things that they have experienced. And I love that she's aware of that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, McKay. Although Mrs. Beaver, and we hear her, and it's important. Sometimes I'll have foster parents ask, why do we remove if it adds that much more trauma? Just like McKay was saying, although necessary at times. One thing when we think of when there is a removal of a child, it's important to note that children are not being removed, but for the very worst of abuses. And so when a child comes into care, it is because they need intervention. There needs to be some things that they get. It's an unsafe environment. So for a foster parent that says, well, why do we remove them? If it causes that trauma, if it's that much more for them to deal with, why do we remove them? In Utah foster care, we believe every child deserves to be safe. We believe every child deserves a childhood. We believe that in a world where it's been very unsafe for them, and sometimes even hurtful, and most times hurtful, we believe children should have a season of peace. And so we appreciate when we have families that will open their heart, home, and hands to children who come into care. By the way, kinship is family of these children coming into care. And one question that I never get from kinship is, why do we remove kids? Usually they're on the side of saying, why didn't you remove them a whole lot earlier? Why couldn't we get intervention in there sooner? And so although we do know that that compounds it adds to that trauma, we do know that it is important at times for a removal to happen, and we're acknowledging that. So when a child is removed, there's a grieving process. That grieving process, when Elizabeth Kubler-Ross came up with the stages of grief, it was displayed in a circle. So first we go to shock and denial, then anger and protest, then bargaining and depression, and resolution and acceptance. We know that there's no circle, that we don't move from one to another in an organized way. That grief really looks all over the place. I can be in anger and protest 1 minute, and then in the next minute, I can be depressed. One day, I might have a little bit of acceptance, and then the next day, I may absolutely be in shock and denial that this is where this is. And so we recognize these, and in your participants handle that is in your training portal, there's electronic participants manual. Handout number 1, developmental stages of grief. I would have you become familiar with that, as well as handout number 2, that is the theories of the stages of grief in foster care and adoption. Please become familiar with those. They will go through this in greater depth, the grieving process in greater depth than we're going to here. But we do know that this can be all over the place. The parents are feeling it, they are feeling it. In fact, we're feeling it. And so please know that there's no orderly fashion to the stages of grief, that this comes up for us at different times and for children in care. Yeah, it's unpredictable in the way that if we've thought about it as a process that we go through each stage and then we're healed, we're not going to see that. And remember, the reasons the children are in care didn't happen overnight. It's unrealistic to think that those are going that the needs are going to be met and that healing and recovery is going to happen overnight. That's unrealistic. Many children have been living in that environment for years upon years upon years. That trust is fractured. And so it's going to take some time. You're not on this journey alone. You have a therapist that's going to be working with the child, the caseworker, mentors. You're not on this journey alone. Please be mindful. It is going to take some time for the child to want to trust, to heal, to process, to recognize the safe place that you're giving for them to do that process or have that process. So, tips for helping a child deal with loss. This comes from your participants manual, handout number 3. So it's entitled Ambiguous Loss Haunts Foster and Adoptive Children. And so become familiar with that. When we talk about what helps a child identify what was lost, in your participants manual, it refers to, remember the list that we made of losses for a child. When possible, incorporate celebrations, rituals, foods, other cultural elements into your family's life. That means that we don't have to choose one or the other. We can do both. We can integrate that however is necessary for healing and for them to have that comfortable place in our home. When we speak about ambiguity and acknowledge the loss, let the children know what they are feeling is normal. Share experience of your loss, not in a way that we're going to undermine them or minimize their loss, but share that loss happens for everybody and be mindful of that. Let them know they're not alone. My teenagers have told me every time they're in a situation in foster care, a lot of what they hear is, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. And they said, nothing's okay. I've just lost my family. Nothing's okay. When we're willing to talk with them about, in an open way, about the loss they're feeling, we give them a voice. And so we want to do that. Give them permission. Redefine the family. Redefine what makes up a family. A family is people who love you. Allow for that openness in the family members and other important relationships in their child's life. I tell this story of a child who the person that he connected with the best was a teacher that he hadn't seen for 2 years. We got permission to go see that teacher, and I can tell you his embrace and his comfort with that teacher was absolutely wonderful to see him connect with somebody that he felt really had his best interest at heart. Give permission for your children to grieve for their loss without guilt. Give your kids tools to express that grief and opportunities to talk about it. Help the children learn to use drawings, journal, working with clay, vigorous exercise, sports, and dance as a way to vent feelings, and make time to join the child in these activities. Dr. Perry says it's really important to have your children involved in one thing that they're good at. And what that means is our children don't have to be involved in everything, but one thing that they're good at really gives our children a place to put that energy and helps them. Life books and memory boxes are really important. There's additional trainings on memory boxes and life books, but it's one way that the children can take their stuff with them. They can carry that with them instead of losing what has those momentums that they come with and that they get while in foster care. So another way to really help children. With these tools, have open communication about the history and important memories and honor them. Help to construct a child's story and correct misconceptions while building trust. And open communication about important people in the child's life is as a way of honoring them and their importance to the child. Be mindful that as we do this, our children will be able to heal and process that grief that they're going through. I'm going to go to a case study and then we are going to go for a break. I want you to assume yourself the foster parent of our 13-year-old Darren. Darren is placed with his grandparents at birth. He is in foster care since he was 9 years old because his parents were unable to care for him. Darren's case study is on handout number 4 and 5 in your participants manual. So this is Darren. With Darren, again, 13 years old, placed with his grandparents at birth, in foster care since he was 9 years old because his grandparents were unable to care for him. What are the possible signs that Darren might have of grief and loss? What are some possible signs that you might expect to see with Darren?
One of the fun things about 13-year-old teenage boys is that they may have just typical defiant kind of behavior based on their age, but you're going to expect that this is going to have an additional layer to it. A lot of, "You're not my mom, you can't tell me what to do," which most teenagers can't say the "you're not my mom" part, but they're certainly always trying to say "don't tell me what to do" part, but that'll be there just based on age.
He also may be very closed off and reserved with his emotions and feelings, where he's not very forthcoming about sharing anything.
Thank you. Thank you. Just the transitions. Yes. Thank you. Others? I'm guessing trust is going to take a long time to build with Darren. Just his moves and where he is going to take a long time to build. All right, so what we know, our children in foster care, in the foster care system, are likely to experience unresolved grief and ambiguous loss. That we as foster parents will be their advocate, that we will be able to, as we ask ourselves, what is this behavior communicating to me, that we will be able to see that grief and loss, that grief and loss take time and patience, and that a child's progress is absolutely going to follow a developmental stage that they are in, and often underlying grief is an underlying cause of behavior concerns. Grief is normal, and that we can help our children through that grief by being willing to have that conversation with them. Second portion of our class today is going to focus on mental health considerations. And so as we talk about mental health considerations, we know that children who experience loss, separation, and trauma are going to have particular mental health needs. And that's what this theme is going to focus on as we go through this today. We know we can all understand a child's life and experience is going to impact their behavior. Another thing we're going to talk about is concerning behaviors are often misunderstood and lead to misdiagnosis or overdiagnosis without really thinking about the impact that will have on the child. Also, the trauma happens between people, and this is so important, that healing needs to happen through relationships. While children's histories can impact their functioning and their ability to form relationships, the families they are now living with will have a major impact on how the children are going to learn to function, not only in their home, but also within the world that they're in. And supportive, competent professionals trained to work with our children in grief and trauma can make a big difference in that how that trauma and mental health considerations affect the children in the future. Look at our building blocks for today. In this portion of the class, it's going to be commitment. It's going to be commitment, being committed to the child. It's going to also be realistic, and adaptability and flexibility are our building blocks that we're going to work on. So when we look at that and break those down, of course, and under adaptability and flexibility, we as parents will need different types of parenting skills, strategies, methods. We're going to need to expand that parenting paradigm. We're going to need to grab a hold of many things that will allow us to help our children in their different mental health considerations, especially as they need change over time. Parents may look different. Parenting may look different than what the parent is used to. With your children, you've had time to establish trust. If you have your own kids, you've had that time to establish trust. You've had the opportunity to be there and see and go through the journey with your children. Bringing children into that, it does take a little bit of time to build trust and be able to be with them in many different ways as we consider mental health needs for them. And for foster parents and adoptive parents that recognize parent strategies, a typical parent strategy is not working, and you're willing to change that up. You're willing to stop what is not working and be willing to open and be adaptable and flexible and learn how to parent in a different way just to meet the child's needs wherever they are. Being realistic, when we look at that, effective parents understand that a child with mental health considerations will need care, patience, support, caregivers with realistic expectations. A typical child needs a parent with realistic expectations. It's going to be so much more important for a child with mental health considerations. Again, we've already talked a little bit today about when you see that a child can't do something, when you handle that differently than when it's not seen. So that ambiguous loss that we were talking about, that same thing came up. You can see somebody having a parent pass away. You can see somebody going through that loss. But when that ambiguous loss happens and you don't see it, it's harder to deal with that and make space for that and keep that place there. So absolutely, we want to do that and being realistic. Please, we want to make sure as foster and adoptive parents that we are celebrating every small victory, every success, please focus on the celebrations, focus on what your child is able to do. Celebrate those small successes. It will spur more success along the way. It will build that encouragement your children need to see that hope and that they have some power. And then being committed as well. Parents are dedicated to sticking with the child, no matter how difficult the journey. We want to absolutely be there for our kids and let them know. And remember, we've already talked about this today, but remember, the injury did not happen overnight. It is going to take time to overcome that. I was doing a training in Richfield, and I had a couple in my class, and the dad expressed that he had two girls in their home, and they became so overwhelmed with the behaviors that was getting all their focus. And he said eventually we had the two children removed and placed in a different home. And he said, I have absolutely regretted that all of this time. They were our children. We should have stuck with them. And had we, had we been committed, that would have been what needed to happen for them. I don't think they weren't committed. I think that it's important to take self-care and to be able to know that it's going to take time. And sometimes it's going to take a lot more time than we want it to take. And recognize for our children how difficult it can be. Okay, so I have a question for you. What do all these people have in common? Look at this list of people that we have here, and what do they have in common? Anybody want to venture some guess? Successful, Marshall says. Thank you. You guys participate so well. Thank you. Thank you. Other things? Thank you, Marshall. Successful. What else? Might they have something else in common? Or a few things in common. I don't know. Yes, they are successful. Famous. Yeah. Yeah. Anything else you might guess that they would have in common? All of these people are successful, like Marshall said, with mental health vulnerabilities. All of these people have some mental health vulnerabilities, and they've been able to be successful with that. So absolutely, we're going to work towards understanding in this section, understanding how and why this happens and what can help. So in understanding mental health considerations, we want to absolutely be aware that everyone has mental health needs, and it's important to address those needs. Sometimes people have mental health needs that meet definitions of a mental health diagnosis. Others don't. Children you're caring for may have a diagnosis. While any given diagnosis doesn't tell the whole story, some studies show that as many as 80% of children in foster care have been given a mental health diagnosis. So let me say that one more time. Studies show that 80% of children in foster care have been given a mental health diagnosis. That is a huge number. As with any medical diagnosis, if children have a mental health diagnosis, it's helpful to understand so that you can understand the child's needs and identify appropriate services to help them with those needs. Number one, if we don't understand what is going on for the child, how are we as their advocates going to continue to advocate for them and promote well-being? So it's important that we have understanding, and that when we have a child with a mental health diagnosis, that we are willing to have education around that so that we can continue to advocate for that child. That's our work to do. Okay, and so as we look at this is the alphabet soup of common diagnosis. All of these examples of disorders or mental health concerns are going to be familiar to you. You've seen them, we talk about them so much that oftentimes this can be a jumbled up altogether. One diagnosis fits behavior of 3 diagnoses, and it's really, it becomes really jumbled for many people. For our children, it becomes jumbled. For parents, it becomes jumbled. Instead of getting all tripped up and letting the confusion rule all of that, if a child in your care is given a diagnosis, it's helpful to focus on learning about that diagnosis. While it may be appropriate to figure out the diagnosis for you, it would not be. We don't have to worry about what that diagnosis means, and we definitely would never be doing a diagnosis, right? We're going to leave that to the specialist. We're going to leave that to the therapist working with the child. But it is important that we learn about that diagnosis so that we can, again, advocate for our children and get the types of services and understand what the professionals around us are asking us to do for that child. And so there's no doubt about it. It can be confusing at times, but as our role is to advocate for that child, we want to understand as much as we can about any diagnosis that our children are given so that we can help them with that. And largely, while the children are in your care is a window of opportunity to get them as the services that they need, that they can have in place when they are reunited with their parents. So when the children go home, those services are already in place and the family's already participating in those because you've advocated and asked for that. So let's think about behaviors that you might see with a child that has separation, loss, and trauma. What behaviors would you see? Here's some. What are other ones? What are other behaviors you might see? You can just put them in chat or unmute and call them out. Trying to be perfect. Yeah. Yeah. Withdrawing. Good.
I see the hoarding on there, and I would say, specifically we see a lot of food hoarding, but other hoarding behaviors as well, but also just other behaviors around food, maybe not simply the hoarding of it, but there's a lot around food, I'd say.
Okay,
Yes, lots of food.
perfect. Lots of stomach aches, having a hard time going to bed and sleeping in chat. Good. Needing to be in ISA or they're freaking out. Yes. Knowing that you're there. Absolutely. General regression, stealing, headaches, not feeling well in general, or being over clingy. I appreciate that in the responses that you've given me, not wanting to go to school, you've shown not only externalizing behaviors, but internalizing behaviors, internalizing that hurt, the stomach aches, the being the physical symptoms of that. Yeah, having a hard time going to withdrawing. So there's some things really there that we can be mindful of and look towards. It's important to notice behaviors that a person focuses inwards towards themselves, and keep those of utmost concern as well. And you guys have put a great number of those in chat. Thank you. So there is an assessment that is done for the children that are coming into care. And one of the things that's going to happen for a child is within the first 30 days, there's going to be a mental health assessment that takes place. That assessment is going to include trauma and the attachment history, physical impacts of that, environmental impacts of that, and loss and grief. We would do well to keep to continue to look at this and know that it's important to put together a strong treatment team who understands how complex this is, that can focus on the whole child, not a diagnosis. A diagnosis is not the child. The child is the child with a diagnosis. And so professional assessments should evaluate a child's strengths and needs to be determined for what services are appropriate for them. All assessments for professional treatment should include an understanding of these things. Remember, the more that we can be knowledgeable about, and that's one of the struggles, is that we're not going to have all the history, and it takes us a little while of getting to know the children. Like I so wish that, I mean, we can keep on giving information, but I so wish that I could see all that history for them and have all that knowledge going in and asking for services for them. You won't know that. You will get to know the child as they come into your home, and we can always talk about things that come up for the child as we participate in services with them. And that looks different for every child. That's our involvement is to help them and to encourage growth and development. So trauma and attachment history, the children you will be caring for have had many traumas to their bodies, physical, sexual, and this will have an impact on how they think and feel about themselves and others around them. The world probably has not been a safe place for them. That will require us to really look for attachment as a theme, because this will affect their ability to trust and the way children think and feel about themselves and the world around them. These thoughts and feelings on the inside will be expressed through behaviors that can be really honestly confusing sometimes to not just foster parents and adopted parents, but professionals as well. There's going to be some physical impacts. There are also psychological indicators that may impact a child's functioning. Were they exposed to drugs or alcohol prenatally? Did they have developmental delays? Or was there sensory hypersensitivity? All of these things can make it seem like a child could be overreacting or and contribute to misbehavior. And then environmental impacts. We've been having the debate, is what's more influential, environmental or biological? Is it the nature or nurture? We've been having the debate forever. We know that both are very impactful for our kids. It's important to think about the factors impacting a child's current situation. It's helpful to notice how a child does in different settings as well, such as how are they getting along in school? What does daycare look like? How are they doing at home? How are they responding to different caregivers is something that we're going to look at too. And how do the different cultures in each of these places impact them? For example, do people look, seem, eat, act, live, dress different than the child is used to? And how does that impact him? Loss and grief. Loss and grief is critical to consider when we're looking at what an assessment should include and how to help a child, especially if the child's had multiple moves. Loss is considered the center of the core issue that children in foster care and adoption experience over a lifetime. We should never, cannot ever lose sight of the effects that grieving loss looks like for a child and how that impacts their needs and their behaviors. For me, this is the 7 core issues of loss. Let me see if I can expand it just a little bit so you can see it. Would anybody be willing to read this for me? I'm not going to make you, but I would love for you to.
I can, Denise.
Thank you.
It says loss begins the journey and remains at the center because even when a child has a permanent family, it is crisis and or trauma that creates the circumstances. There is the first loss that led to the child being with a new family, and then many secondary losses that continue to affect family members throughout their lives. Some of these are vague and may be described as a feeling of distress and confusion about people who are physically absent but physiologically and emotionally present in their lives. and these feelings can occur at any point in their lives. Children lose both their first families, siblings, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. They may lose cultural, racial, and ethnic connections and or their language of origin. If they are separated as older children, they may also lose friends, foster families, pets, schools, neighborhoods, and familiar surroundings.
Again, just another example of how confusing it can be for children who are experiencing loss and grief, and the difficulty for making sense of that for a child. Thank you for reading that, Marshall. I appreciate that. This is where we bring in the complexity. Even professionals may have a hard time accurately diagnosing and treating a child of these backgrounds. What even makes this more puzzling is when if we look at this chart, I think it's the left-hand side for you, you will see the diagnoses. You see these as you look at those. And you'll read the different symptoms of those diagnoses. While it may seem easier for mental health diagnosis to explain behavior or even ask for medication to control a child's behavior, figuring out what treatment needs to be given addressing all mental health considerations is important, because as we look at this chart, what we see is absolutely the symptoms of each of these disorders are also the symptoms of trauma. And so it can be difficult to absolutely identify where the contributors of the symptoms come from and where they absolutely need to be addressed from. It's important. Maybe the trauma symptoms will be obvious and the child will be given a PTSD diagnosis because of the behaviors. Or maybe they may notice signs of trauma that may not be as obvious, and a different diagnosis will be there. But no matter what the diagnosis is, we're looking at best at advocating for our child for well-being. And so we do have intersecting diagnoses, and it's important to work on those symptoms with a professional and to keep in mind that what we're seeing may not be all of the picture, that there can be more and often is more to that. And again, creating a felt safe environment is going to be crucial to helping children. No matter what the diagnosis is, learning about that, creating safety, creating structure and routine is going to absolutely be important. When it comes to medication that is used to treat mental health conditions, that medication is known as psychotropic medications. A number of studies have found that children in child welfare have been prescribed these types of medicines at a rate of 3 to 11 times higher than children not in child welfare. So 3 to 11 times higher than children not in child welfare. For example, a recent report on Medicaid records in 5 states found that 21 to 39% of children in foster care received a prescription for psychotropic medication. And as you see from the slide, that's much higher than prescriptions for children not in foster care in those states. In this study, it also shows that the prescriptions were written for a large number of children under the age of 6. This is critical because there's still so much brain development that is happening for children under the age of 5 and 6 that those medications can absolutely alter that development and brain function. Over 40% of children in foster care who took psychotropic medications were taking 3 or more psychotropic medications at the same time. Now, in Utah, we do have that the University of Utah oversees children in foster care that have been prescribed medications. And so they are looking at what a child has been prescribed, and they're working with the physicians to make sure that those decisions are being made in the best interest of the child, that we're being careful to help the child and not hurt the child by just being on by just having more thought into what we're giving kids and how that's helping them. After a child is prescribed medication, it is important that we all understand that it is not up to us to decide if that medication is appropriate or not. It is not up to us as foster parents and adoptive parents to decide how long the child should take the medicine. It really has to happen from a professional. And so please, please, please know your role to give that medication in a way that it is determined needed for the child. Be a part of that team that comes together and talks about that. I can tell you, I had a time when my child we were in the office and the doctor was saying, I think he was telling me that he was going to prescribe a certain drug for my child. And I said, I'm kind of concerned about that. And these are the reasons why. And he was absolutely willing to hear that. He said, this is why I'm describing it. This is why I'm prescribing it. And this is what I hope will happen from that. We could talk back and forth. You absolutely need to be a team member in that conversation. You will have a DCFS healthcare nurse that can also be informative in helping you understand the diagnoses and helping you understand medications. But please know your role as a foster parent is to give that medication as it is prescribed on the bottle and as it is determined for the child. Remember, as you watch policies and procedures, that all medication needs to be locked up, and that it's even medications that we wouldn't think are always have permission to give medications. Even I have a lot of children that have come in my home that are on melatonin to sleep. We would want to make sure we have a diagnosis or that we have a prescription from a provider to be able to give medications to the child. All right. We're going to listen to it's only 4 minutes long. We're going to listen to Dr. Lisa as she talks about, she's a child adolescent psychiatrist, and she's going to talk about, she's going to talk about considerations when addressing children's mental health needs.
What are psychotropic medications?
So psychotropic medications are medications that can help individuals with a variety of different things. If an individual is having difficulties with their mood or worries, anxiety, or their focus or attention, or even at times where they might be hearing things or seeing things that aren't really there or feeling very paranoid, we can utilize psychotropic medications to be able to target some of those symptoms and make them feel better. Let's explore this further. And so what that would really look like is just, once again, like going to your pediatrician, but we would do a comprehensive assessment. So we would really look at, well, what is going on, especially at home, school, and with their peer interactions, because those are really the global levels that we're looking at as far as functioning with their child and adolescent. So we review all of that. We look at school history, look at medical history, we look at developmental history, we look at family history, social history, all these things, and we do a comprehensive mental status exam. And then we're working with both the child and the parents. We need all of them there for us to integrate this information. What's going on with the child, and those symptoms falling in a depression bucket, anxiety bucket, attention and focus bucket, And then how would we then target the treatment plan? And sometimes medications are necessary and sometimes they're not, but that comprehensive assessment is essential. When a child might be feeling sad or down, actually more commonly when someone is feeling sad or down, a lot of times we see anger and irritability, worries or nervousness, and or at times even some of our kids might be experiencing psychotic symptoms where they might be hearing things or seeing things that aren't really there or feeling paranoid. At times we do consider medications to be able to target those symptoms. As a child and adolescent psychiatrist, the first route is not medications. It's actually looking at all these alternative supports. So one, I'm a huge supporter of therapy. And really, frankly, medications should be utilized in combination with therapy. Only when we're in a place where either the child just needs a maintenance dose, and or the symptomatology is so severe that we need to start medication so they can even access therapy, then we go with medication alone. But really, individual therapy is extremely helpful. At times when we have a child that might be, struggling in school, sometimes it's just a meeting with the school to look at how can we better support this child in school and decrease barriers to learning. And that might be additional resources in the school, pulling the child out, having a little bit more individualized instruction, more supports in the school. So all these things need to be looked at before first jumping to medication.
We've talked about medication and your role in that. Please just know that it is important that you know what your role is and that you follow those guidelines pretty closely. Handout number 2 in your participants manual is going to give you a little bit more information on that. Handout number 2 is the roles of parents who are fostering when psychotropic medication has been prescribed. The policies, it talks about the policies and procedures specific to your setting. And remember that you are absolutely a part of that conversation, but we also need to be a team member in that conversation and do what is best for the child. As we talk about labels, as we talk about
Denise,
yes.
sorry, can I go back just a second?
Yeah.
As a clinician myself, I would just want to, therapy is great. But we have to also advocate for our children in the therapeutic setting and make sure that we have therapists who are trauma informed and trained. And that you might think, oh, well, aren't they because they're therapists? But there's very specific modalities that work very, very well for children with trauma histories. Also, if you have a very young child, they should be doing an experiential type of therapy. If you're having even if it's a trauma-focused cognitive behavior therapy with a young child, not going to be really that effective. So as a foster parent, I really encourage people a lot that the match between the child and the therapist is critical, and it is okay to say, yeah, I don't think this is working. Always run that through the team with the caseworker's approval, and you're part of that team. But if you feel like that things are not going well, that this is not a good match for your child, that is one of the things that we want you to do, is to advocate for the kids that are in your home and understand that the match between child and therapist is very, very important. And you may have to do some shifting around if that is not something that is working, and that's okay.
Thank you, McKay. Awesome. Remember, for your older children, we've come so far, but there can still be some stigma around mental health and medications and all of that. So continue. We've talked so much about this, but continue to have an open conversation with them. I once had a 17-year-old in my care, and he didn't want to take medication because it wasn't the cool thing to do. I can tell you everybody around him knew when he was on medication and all of us as a family knew when he was taking his medication and knew when he wasn't, because it made that much of a difference for him. And so please just be mindful, speak best interest for your child, help them. If there is some stigma around that, if there's some feelings that they have around that, talk about where that comes from and be able to talk about that with those people around them, because that needs to be talked about. There's so much language that happens around our kids and so many feelings that are happening for our children that we want to make sure that we are part of that conversation. Um, Speak up, play a key role. I mean, you are playing a key role. Be a strong advocate for your child. Um, that will be important. Also, it's important to be careful around the language we use around labels, around diagnoses, and still having expectations for our children and not sizing that all up to a diagnosis, but also being mindful of what that diagnosis means for a child. Become aware and teach children that that they have a part to play in that mental diagnosis, and help them remember to describe themselves and who they are as resilient and strong and smart and hardworking, and not any random or rude words that they hear people say about them. I it's difficult, but the language around labels is so important. Also, to not refer to a child as their diagnosis if they have one, but to see them as a whole person with a diagnosis. Since you will be speaking up on behalf of your child, it's important for you to use and encourage others that you come in contact with to be appropriate and descriptive in language about mental health needs. Again, we've made such a huge step forward. We want to keep on making those steps forward. We have a long ways to go. Consider how the words that we use are going to impact our children and how they're going to feel about mental health needs. Yeah, work with them. I know that for one of my children in care, they didn't want to be someone who needed to go to therapy. And when we changed what that would look like for them and what those needs really were and how that was helpful and what consideration, now, yeah, and so that switched, and for them, and I'm grateful it did. Words have we've learned from diagnosis should be used sparingly. Be mindful of the words that we choose to label a child's behavior as well, and how that could sound diagnostic, such as hyperactivity, oppositional, crazy. Those words mean so much, and so we want to be careful around those languages, and we can change that to a strength-based. We can just look at a strength-based way to describe words that are along that. So card number 1, where we're saying hyper, maybe we want a sample of strength-based description would be more like full of energy all the time. The engine runs fast, doesn't seem to sleep as much as other kids, and has a lot of pep in their step. But and then card number 2, oppositional, may be more a more strength-based way of description of saying that would be hasn't learned limits or rules in the family, school, etc. Needs extra guidance and support to stay on track. Has a hard time accepting rules or limits, still learning boundaries. Crazy. Maybe a better way and a better expression of that would be in a lot of emotional pain. Heart and head are feeling really mixed up right now. A lot of confusion. Working hard and struggling to make sense of what they've experienced. These words do mean a lot for our children, and how we describe them sets the stage for how they see themselves. And so we want that inner strength in them, and we want them to have that self-identity, and we need to be careful around that. One thing I do want to be careful to mention around language is if your child is ever expressing a desire to commit suicide, have suicidal tendencies, talking about killing themselves, we have no lenience there as to decide where that child is and to assess that. If our child is talking about suicide, killing themselves, we are obligated to get them health care immediately. So if I have a child that's saying, and we're very flippant with words. So I've heard my children say, I'm going to take myself out. I could kill myself. I could kill you, whatever. Those things become very flippant when they're heard at school, when they're a common thing that is being said. Whenever that happens around me, I am sure to tell my kids, hey, please use different language than that, because I take life very seriously, and what you're saying, I will act on. And so they very quickly learn that that's not going to be a language that is acceptable to throw around like that. I've got to take action on that. I want to take action on that. Not only do I want to talk about suicide with kids, I know that those topics can be hard for parents to bring up, but just like talking about alcohol use and tobacco use and drug use is a preventative measure for our kids, so is talking to them about suicide. And so have those open conversations, and be willing to say, have you ever felt like hurting yourself? Ask those pointed questions to them, because we need to be able to talk about that. But I always assure my children that I need them to stay away from the flippant use of those words, because we are obligated to get help for them. Never do we want that to be on your shoulders of deciding whether the child is serious or not, or what the complications may be of that. You would, in that situation, take them right to the hospital to be assessed by a specialist who would be doing that, or a mental health professional that would be doing that. And so I want to reiterate your responsibility there in keeping kids safe. We're gonna watch. This is Jessica, and she has overcome some tremendous challenges, including a teen pregnancy and some significant behavior problems in the past. And this is taken from a documentary called Foster. It's on YouTube. You're welcome to look it up. And Jessica's overcome some challenges to be where she is today. And so let's watch this for just a minute.
So Jessica, what really helped you achieve the success that you have had, and why you believe those forces around you worked?
The biggest thing, I think, was having people come into my life and hold hope for me. There was very long periods of time in my adolescence where I had given up on believing that I could achieve anything. When I was 18, I went to a nonprofit organization, and I met people there who started talking to me for the first time about education. And at that time, I had very firm beliefs that I was a stupid person. I tested very low in community college. I tested into 3rd grade math and 8th grade English, which was very discouraging. But they believed in me, and I really needed that, because even after they discovered that I was pregnant and I thought that they were gonna give up on me because I wasn't gonna become a success story, they still pushed me. People have spoken life into me and I was dead.
Jessica Antonia Chandler. No crying, baby. This is happy. This is happy. I want you to be proud.
Two of my former foster sisters, when they found me on Facebook and saw that I had got my master's degree, they decided to go to college. I guess I was just so terrible that they're like, if Jessica got a diploma, if she graduated from college, anybody can. Like, this must be easy. And even though it wasn't easy, it was since they knew my story and they knew how much I had struggled and how bad my behaviors had been at one time, they knew that transformation was possible for them too.
So Jessica talks about overcoming challenges and getting her master's degree, and now she has a professional job and she is successful at parenting. What did you hear her say contributed to her success? What was the thing that contributed to her success?
Really, the hope that other people held for her when she couldn't hold that hope for herself.
Yes.
And boy, how powerful that is.
Yes. If you were parenting Jessica, what is one thing you would have done to show her you believed in her with your children that come into your home, with the children that you interact with the youth that you interact with? What are things that you do that are an encouragement for your children and show that you have hope and that you believe in them? Please share your experience.
I think one thing that we've found as our children have grown up and graduated high school and or just left the home, is just letting them know that they can come back, letting them know that they still have that support once they're over 18. Because I think there's a lot of fear, especially kids that are adopted or maybe just aging out, like your kinship or guardianship with them, but just letting them know that they have someone to fall back on when they go out and their car breaks down or they get kicked out of apartment or they lose a job, that they can come back and they have that safe base to start over.
Thank you. Thank you, Marshall. Other thoughts on mental health considerations?
One of the things that I've learned is that as important as the language that we use and being very careful about age appropriate, as we run the gamut of different ages of children in our home, is also sharing the realities with the children about their diagnoses. For example, when we have teenagers in our home, there are many mental health considerations that can be triggered by things like marijuana use. And it's so important that the children are knowledgeable about that they have the information, because it's not unusual for children, especially right now, to be just experimenting with things. They're out with friends and people are passing something around. But these youth need to understand the diagnosis that they have, or that perhaps their parents had that they do not have, but that something like marijuana could trigger that. And so it's super important to have very open and honest conversations about these mental health things. In addition to being careful with our words, we need to be super frank as well.
I absolutely love what you've said. And as we talk to our kids about maybe some of the things that they're feeling because of those diagnoses that they have, my child does not want to work in close proximity with anybody. You give him some space and he can do really, really well. But close proximity, he doesn't. There's some sensory issues that he has that if he's aware of, that he can work around them as he goes into adulthood. It's important for him to know that it might not be that person that is bugging him, but the diagnosis that the symptoms of that diagnosis that is coming out, and so that he can make sure that he is making space for himself in that way. Along those same lines, I had a child that for whatever reason, even the neuropsych could not identify why he could not read, but he could not read, like not read at all. And he hated school. He was school was the very worst place for him to be. And this boy would work hard. He would spell those spelling words 20 times each. He would go over them. He would work really hard, and none of that ever came to fruition in the classroom. He was never able to show the effort that he was putting in the classroom. That never happened for him, and school became a place it was very, very difficult for him to be. Again, as everybody was able to complete assignments and do well on tests and to be able to give what the teacher wanted, he was not. And absolutely, that took a toll on self-esteem and self-worth and all of that. And we had nothing to point to. We had a neuropsych that said he's not going to be able to read. And as a parent, I had to take some feedback that was very difficult for me. The neuropsychologist, she said, you can put him in Sullivan's Learning. You can put him in as many programs as you want, as you already have, and he's still not going to be able to read. So you need to back up and take this pressure off him to be able to do this. It's not going to happen for him. And then she talked to him about how she's worked with an engineer, how she's worked with a doctor who couldn't read, and how they got education through different avenues. And it's so awesome that we live in a place and a time that they can. This young man my son puts engines together. He's a mechanic. I asked, how did you, I mean, as a little child, he'd say, will you read these instructions to me so I can do this? But I asked him, as he is so successful at the things that he does, how did you learn to weld? How did you learn to do that? He goes, oh, I watched YouTube and then I just did it. And so he's very smart. He can pick that up and he can do that. But if you're asking him to show that in book learning, he will not be able to do it. And I unintendedly put that pressure on him. Oh, we just got to study more. We just got to go at it a different way. And so I was part of that anxiety for him in continuing to push him in something that he wasn't capable of doing. And so really being informed that way is helpful too. And recognizing for kids who are in school, that may be really a tough place. I know he was hearing every time he went to school. Well, he told me in the 11th grade, I'm going to drop out. And I said, you can't drop out. You have to finish school. And he goes, Mom, I go to a place every day that confirms to me that I will never do it, that I don't have what it takes. Why would I want to go there? And I think that was the first time I really understood what it would be like for him to go through his learning day at school in with his mental health vulnerability and learning disorder. Any comments? Folks, especially we have some very vulnerable youth, our LGBTQ and our older youth are transitioning out of foster care youth. They're very vulnerable in mental health considerations. So please know that you can do a lot of work there to give acceptance and belonging and to help foster relationships. That is what we do. We are foster parents. We foster relationships. So know that there's a lot of work that can be done with children or youth that are especially vulnerable to this. One more example that I'm open to your thoughts. Marshall says, advocating for them at school is so important. Help them get a IEP or at least a 504 to make school successful as successful as possible for them. I would agree. And then even as they get older, again, you'll learn these resources as you tend to your children, but even working with voc rehab, making it possible for them to get just like Jessica did, get that further education with realistic expectations around it. Any other comments that you have regarding this? Okay. We will wrap up with, we all have mental health needs and considerations that impact our body, mind, and spirit. We all need to tend to those to stay well. Mental health is impacted by our life experiences and those and who and what is and has surrounded us, including the stressors that we have, the supports that we have, the culture that is around us, the community, and our beliefs. Atypical behavior should not always be viewed as mental illness. Context matters. Behavior has a tremendous capacity for change with time and circumstances and support. I had a child that had come to my home, 9 years old, and when they called me to ask if I would take him, they said, Denise, we just need him to have a home for about 2 weeks. We have a bed opening up at Primary Children's Hospital that he is going to, but we're just looking for temporary care. And I said, yeah, absolutely, we can take him. And of course, the bed got delayed. But a month after he was placed in our home, I said, why is he going to Primary Children's Hospital? And they said, he's doing so well in your home, but that's not what we've seen in the other 4 homes that he's been in. And so some of the things that you do in your home will be different than other places that the child has been. There might be a different relationship. There might be a different, there's different things that are happening. And so be mindful that commitment is so important, and if it's not working, to get help in that. And if I'm really convinced that this child needed the structure and the routine, and the teacher that they gave him at school made all the difference for him, that he just needed a place that he was willing to let that be a chance for him. It was nothing that I did at all, but it was where he was, and the chance and the opportunity that he took in making things better. So be mindful of that. Medication is appropriate for a selected number of children, and we should always be careful when we consider that. It will definitely not take all the problems away, and that's not what it's there for. Always should be partnered with therapy and a good support system for your child. A parent who is fostering has a very specific role when it comes to medication. Then lastly, advocacy, teamwork, and knowledgeable professional support will be key to address mental health considerations. Wrap that village, especially with mental health considerations. Please wrap that village around your children. Be in contact with the school counselor. Be in contact with the teachers. Let them know that child has come to your home. Let them know that we have to be confidential, right? We have to be very careful with the information, but we can wrap a village around the children that will help, and youth that will help them be a lot more successful, and have those people cheering for and being encouraging for them along the way. Please know, at the end of the day, the most overwhelming key to a child's success is positive involvement of parents. Remember that Harvard study that said each child needs one caring adult, and one caring adult can change the trajectory path for a child. This is a critical time for you to gather knowledge on how to help children who will be coming into your home. And we appreciate you being here and taking advantage of this time.